What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark. This is season 3. This is episode 18, and I have a good friend. This is going to be so fun because this is kind of not low stakes, Chris, because you're still a big deal to me. But it's nice to hang out with a friend. Got Chris Evans from O.C.E Pedals. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having me. This is really cool.
Yep.
I'm just excited to nerd out for a little while.
Yeah, man. And we already have. So Aaron said, "Can't believe I finally made it to a live one." Thanks, Aaron.
Right one. Have hot takes for 1 hour.
Yeah, man. So Chris, we have a mutual friend in Terry, and that's how we met.
Yes.
And Terry does all the artwork for At Home with Mark, and he's, a really good dude. So I am very thankful for him. He brought us together in this world. But we've talked a bit. We're friends.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about that we've never gotten into.
Sure.
I've been changing this up a little bit because, not that, what's the moment is getting stale, but like, I also am curious for people, like, what's your earliest musical memory?
Weirdly, I think my aunt used to make me mixtapes when I was like a real little kid. It was like in the 80s. So it'd be like all the, whatever the hot like 80s songs were. And I remember like listening to in my grandmother's like living room. I guess that would probably be like, it would be like Huey Lewis and like
sports.
Huey Lewis was like my first favorite band as a kid. It was my first concert was a Huey Lewis concert. Pearl Jam was like my first quote unquote real concert, but it was Huey Lewis was like my dad took me to see him. So yeah, I think it was something like that. Like I think it was like listening to like Footloose or something like that, and like dancing in my like grandmother's like living room when I was like 6, something like that. Yeah,
that's a deep cut. That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
So is this your dad's side or your mom's side?
Aunt? That's my dad's side. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was she the cool aunt kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of. My mom's side is not super like music family. Like my mom's side's Polish, and my uncle's like really into like polkas, but I wasn't getting a lot of like modern music from that side. But my dad's younger brother was like, he used to have like the Miami Vice, suit with the Huarache sandals and all that kind of stuff, just like a little bit younger kind of thing. Right. And yeah, so that was, she's one of my favorite aunts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. So is your dad musical? Does like he play anything? Or?
No. I think both my parents had guitars, probably just because they were like young in the 60s and 70s. People were probably like just, I remember there was when I first started playing, there was like a crappy classical guitar and this just really beat up acoustic that was like falling apart, that was up in the attic. And before I even knew what I was doing, I was just like holding it, or whatever. And but no, not really. There's not a lot of musicians in my family.
Well, then what made you gravitate towards that instrument though?
We're a similar age. I'm 42. I'll be 43 in April. And so both of us, I think, had that thing you've talked about a bunch about, like, my formative years were like the grunge explosion, so like I was like going into 7th grade, 12, 13 years old when like the Black Album came out and Use Your Illusion came out and Nevermind and 10 and, Bad Motorfinger and all that. And so there was a lot of, it was a time when like kind of more rootsy guitar music was like on MTV and was like more part of the zeitgeist again, I think, and I mean, I don't know, I think it might have been like watching the November Rain video when Slash walks out of the church and he's like playing the solo and like the helicopters flying around him, I sort of want to do that,
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that video very well. And I remember the reason I was never a Guns N' Roses fan. Like a bunch of my friends were, and still are really. But like I remember that video, I think because Shannon Hoon, because I was a big Blind Melon fan. I'm like, what the heck is Shannon Hoon doing singing with GNR? Like,
yeah.
This is like such a like different thing that he's doing, But I totally remember that video vividly.
It was like epic, like,
oh dude, it was like a mini movie. It was like a Jerry Bruckheimer like production. Let's get into like, since we're both, because I'm 42. You're 79?
Yeah, 79.
Yeah, me too. So let's get into like the grungy stuff, because I don't talk about it enough with people who can identify with it.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to jazzers and stuff, they're like, yeah, great, Pearl Jam's awesome. But let's talk about Miles. So for me, obviously Pearl Jam was my foray into it, and you said it was your first concert. So
yeah,
tell me, like, between, because like, I listened to a lot of Alice in Chains, I listened to a lot of Pearl Jam, a lot of Soundgarden, a lot of Nirvana, but like amongst that group, and Mudhoney a bit, I listened to that, but like amongst that group of musicians, like, what was it about Pearl Jam that like drew you more to them? What was the barometer? What was going off there?
Yeah, I've tried to figure that out, because as my tastes have changed as different ages, like I'm definitely one of those fans that, like, you hardcore PJ guys, like there was a line I think in PJ 20 where like Mike says, we kind of changed our style, and then there was a bunch of people that just went, nah, not really what I like, and then they went off and got into other stuff. And so like later in the 90s, I was getting more into like hardcore and like punk and stuff, and so I kind of was like, that what they were doing wasn't as interesting to me anymore. Not to say it's bad. I'm not one of those people that says like when bands can't change, it's like artists are allowed to do whatever they need to do. And I'm also allowed to say that's not what I dig, but like as I've gotten older, I think like Soundgarden resonates more to me now, like as an older guy. And I don't know if it's something about Cornell's lyrics or whatever it was, but, I think back then it might have been that like I grew up, like my hometown is like total hard rockville. Like I know all these kids now that I've met out in California that were from like Portland and stuff, and they were all into like all that crazy underground like alternative stuff that in the earlier 90s that like I didn't even really hear about. And my dad was like, he was into like Skinner and like Bad Company and like stuff like that. And I think maybe it was something about Pearl Jam being a little bit more like straight ahead rock-ish, and like with the cool Mike's long solos and stuff like that, which you weren't getting as much from like, Alice in Chains or like Soundgarden or whatever. And, maybe they weren't as like weird as maybe like the Smashing Pumpkins or something like that. And
right.
I don't know. And I just remember thinking that they were like the coolest dudes too. Like I had all their pictures up and like I tried to dress like them, like going to see PJ 20 when PJ 20 came out, they did 2 nights at this big theater in LA in the Cinerama Dome. And I went and saw it. And it was really cool, the early stuff, because it was all the stuff with like, the cut off like army shorts with like long underwear underneath them and like Doc Martens and like wool socks and like all that stuff. Like I was like, I remember doing that, like trying to do that. I remember like going to a birthday party in the middle of summer in New York where I'm from, and it was like 98% humidity, but I was wearing like Doc Martens with wool socks. And, like, like just because I was like, I needed to look the part, and I was just like killing myself. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff wrapped into it. Because I mean, the thing is that alternative revolution kind of music thing that happened starting with like Nirvana it was a cultural thing too. It wasn't just music. I mean, it was this shift where it was like young people were like, you know what, I don't really want to hear like hair metal guys. I want to hear people talking about real stuff. There was that side of it. There was like political sides of it too, so there was a lot more going on. And being like 13 and just kind of coming into your own as like a person, there was a lot that was like wrapped up in that, like having bands and, and yeah, I think maybe that might've been what it was and Eddie being kind of outspoken and stuff. And, and maybe I dug him more as a personality than like Kurt or whatever it was, or maybe Chris Cornell was too good looking. I don't know,
He's a pretty dude.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy. I mean, I think about him all the time. Chris, I do. Like I when we were driving down to Nashville, and we were in like 11th hour on the road. We're like an hour out from outside of Nashville.
Yeah.
And it was me and my bass player going down, and my drummer was going to meet us there. He had to fly in. And we were getting tired and loopy and all that stuff. And I was like, all right, we're going to put on some Soundgarden. And I was like, actually, you know what? I have never really listened to Audioslave. And my bass player was like, what? And he was like, okay, well, let's listen to that. And it's when that band formed, when Audioslave formed, I was kind of like, really? Okay. And, I remember hearing stuff on the radio and like, and never like, putting a snooty nose to it or anything. I always liked it because I always loved Chris's voice and the way he can manipulate it and turn it super gravelly or make it super sweet.
Yeah.
But I feel like I think about him a lot because and you can see it in PJ20, but I feel like he was really like the glue and the mentor of that whole scene. He seems like he was like the godfather of like, hey man, this isn't a competition. We're all in this together. Yeah. Let's do this together.
Yeah.
And it happened. But then like, at that time period of when I was listening to like Bad Motorfinger and like not until it Super Unknown came out, did I really get Soundgarden.
Yeah.
And I don't think they got what they were doing until that album.
No, that's like their swan song, it's like everyone has that record when they become them. And I think, well, also like fans like to just, argue over, but with Soundgardens, they didn't do that much, if you think about it, like that was really like, you're like, yeah, they got it. Weirdly, as I've gotten older, I have this thing where sometimes I dig when bands took a style to like an extreme. And like I love like And Justice for All.
Right.
By Metallica, because they're like, well, we're just gonna play as fast as we can. There's gonna be 1,000 riffs,
Yeah.
And I actually really like Down on the Upside. I know it's a really uneven record because you can tell it's a band that's like fracturing, but the lyrical content in that album is like you're really hearing Chris, and especially years later, the tragic end of the story, but it's like you get like, oh yeah, this dude had a lot of demons. And I think the thing that struck me watching PJ20 was just how thoughtful and kind of like emotionally loving of a guy he seemed to be. Like the amount of times he was talking about like that thing when he talks about Mike playing the guitar solo for like Reach Down or whatever. Yeah. And he's like, he has some stuff going on and you guys better be ready if it ever comes out. And then Mike's like, well, he knows me. So yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
like something's wrong. Like he's infected. Yeah. I love that scene too, man. Yeah. He does. He seems like he just has like, he had a heart of gold and like he was very intentional with his life, how he did things and the decisions he made in his career and all of that. It just like speaks volumes to me about the way that you can treat your career in the music industry. And there's so many, there's countless musicians who, have been, indirect mentors for me by watching, living vicariously through their records. But like that band in particular and Soundgarden, like Super Unknown is probably one of the most like masterful recorded albums of the 90s, period. Like, I don't think I understood, like everyone's always like, oh man, you got to listen to this record through headphones, bro. And I was like, I'm okay. Listen to it in the car. I'm a songwriter, so I like the song. But the first time I listened to that at the gym in my headphones, I was like, whoa, okay. Now I get it. And that album was done so well that it really is a benchmark. It probably was kind of like that Pet Sounds, Sgt. Pepper type of a thing at the moment. Because I bet you a lot of those other bands were like, whoa, dude, we have to step it up. Like when they put that record out.
There's this thing there's this really roundabout story about how I discovered that too, was as a kid, I was always like, why are Soundgarden records always so low, so quiet? Because I wanted to crank my head, my Walkman up and be like destroying my hearing or whatever. But years later, when Metallica put out Death Magnetic, and then there was that whole thing where I was like, why is this album so loud? And then I read up on like the loudness wars and like Rick Rubin and the stovepiping, like mastering and all this stuff. And then I was like looking at this list on like Wikipedia that was like the worst mastered albums and the best, and like Soundgarden was on there a couple times, I think.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, okay, I get it now. Cause it's like if you crank it, you hear more. It's like it's quiet, but the more you can turn it up or like dive into it, the more you hear. And it's like, oh yeah, those guys really kind of had that. Cause even like Down on the Upsides like that. I remember when I first got it and like I was putting it on in like the beginning of like Pretty Noose. I'm like, why is this so quiet? I can't hear anything, you know, or whatever, as a 16-year-old or whatever. But
I feel that way about everything from Yield forward. Like if you really listen to Pearl Jam's Yield at low volumes, it's great. But when you crank that record up and you're like cooking dinner and really kind of immersing yourself like in a 3D fashion with that, album. And it's the same way, man, like with every record past that. And I don't know off the top of my head, you might know, but I don't know who produced the rest of the discography.
I didn't know. Have they been Brendan O'Brien the whole time? I don't know. You know,
no, they've used different people over the years, but Brendan's been a staple kind of in the mix. But like I feel that way. Like that's a real thing, man. Like, and I feel like a lot of artists intentionally do that. And you'll even see it in liner notes. Like people like, this album is meant to be played loud, and like you know, and that's like will be written a lot in Pearl Jam records in the liner notes. And it's true. Like it really does make a difference to really immerse yourself in the song. But like I feel like at that time, if we think about the music that was going on in the 90s, like for instance, so we've got all those bands in Seattle. But then you've got, you know, like we were just talking about Blind Melon. Like I loved Blind Melon. I loved the first record, and I loved Soup even more. I thought Soup was a masterpiece. But like I've been a huge Weezer head too, my whole life. And dude, have you heard the latest record, OK Human?
No, I haven't. Yeah. Is it good?
Oh my God, dude. So that album, and it's funny because like I kind of fell off the Weezer wagon probably around 2002-ish, like with Maladroit was probably the last record I bought.
Yeah.
And then my drummer, right before we left for Nashville, was like, hey, have you got, sorry, I have a dog hair. So my drummer was like, yo, have you heard the latest Weezer record? There's no guitars on it. And I was like, what? It's all symphonic orchestrated string quartets, backbeats, hard backbeats though, acoustic guitars, and like piano. But there's a song, the opening track on that is called All My Favorite Songs.
Okay.
And when we went back, we were, you know, one night we were looking at the Weezer discography. I'm like, holy crap. During this pandemic, they've put out 3 or 4 records. And if you go back before that, between 2002 and then, there's like another 7 or 8 records.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, because like, you know, that album with Beverly Hills on it and all that.
Yeah.
Which I never bought and never got into at the time. But I got on the Peloton the other morning and I was like, Big Brother's listening to my wife because there was a Weezer ride and with like one of my favorite instructors. And I was like, yes, sign me up. I'll do the Weezer ride. But yeah, man, like there was such a diverse, you know, you talk about like Smashing Pumpkins and Weezer and Blind Melon and Pearl Jam and like all these bands, like in like Space Hog. When's the last time someone's talked about Space Hog? Like that band was pretty cool, but they just didn't go anywhere, you know?
Yeah.
So
there was a lot of that in the middle to late 90s. There was a lot of like record companies trying to find stuff. It was like the post grunge era, you know, like, and there was a lot of bands that ended up just getting like one hit because record companies were just like, let's try this. And then like the album wouldn't sell and they'd be like, well, screw it, you know? And the birth of alternative radio, there was just like all these bands that just got like 1 or 2 songs and that was it. And then you never heard of them again. You know, I mean, not to say they're bad, because like you'll meet people that'll be like, what, you didn't like that band? You know, and then you're like, oh, they put out 17 albums after that. You're like, oh, awesome. Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah.
I got really into Canadian bands too. Like at the end of probably like the mid 90s, late 90s, I started finding all these Canadian bands through Much Music because we had satellite TV in my parents' house.
Yeah.
And so like I Mother Earth and what was the other band? Like Our Lady Peace. There were several bands that I like really fell in love with that were Canadian rock bands that were great, you know. So a lot of good music from that time, man. I mean,
yeah. It really, well, it was that final decade, I think, when you could still be like a musician to be a musician, not because it's like the record companies just got crappy in the 2000s, and then the streaming stuff, like the Napster stuff, just screwed everything. Like, I mean, it like made the records companies go crazy, and then now it's like, if you're gonna want to be a musician, it's like you really got to be like dedicated to it, because you're probably not going to make a lot of money, these days. But
100%, man. Well, there's Kalki stopping in. He's a 79 too.
Oh, nice. I didn't even realize that. I never know how old anybody is.
Somebody watching from Germany.
Sweet.
And Aaron said Temple of the Dog was the collab we all needed at the time. And I agree. What was your first CD that you bought?
I think it was like Led Zeppelin 4 or something, because I didn't even really know what to get at the time, something like that.
Remember how they came in the big like cardboard boxes at first, and then they realized how wasteful that was, and then they started the jewel case.
They had the bins for vinyls, and they were like, well, we need them to fit in there. So we can put 2 stacks, so we'll put them in these big boxes. I think it was like I joined one of those CD clubs, where you'd get like 5 for a penny, and then you had to get like 10 over the next year or whatever. And I didn't even really know what to get. I mean, there was this thing that was weird. Like, I was really dorky when I was a kid, and I didn't really come into my own until like I was like a teenager, knowing like what I wanted to do and stuff. And so I think like when I did that, I asked like a friend, I was like, what album should I get? And I think I got like that and some like hip hop album or something, because a lot of my friends were like hip hop kids,
90s hip hop was dope, man.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not good hip hop.
I'm not like dissing on it. It was just, I think it was like, there was definitely a lot of people that I knew, especially in like middle school, that were like crazy hip hop kids, So I was surrounded by that a lot. And that's honestly like probably affected. I was like, when like rap rock and like rap metal got big, I was like, oh my God, finally, it's like my 2 things put together,
Right. Like, I never got into that stuff, man. I don't know what it was. I think I was getting soft at that time, because I was starting to get into jam bands.
There's a lot of it that was terrible, because there was anytime there's like a trend, there's a lot of people that just come into it, and it was like when everyone started having like DJs in like rock bands in like the later 90s, because of like Incubus or like Limp Bizkit or whatever. And then it was like suddenly there'd just be these bands where you'd be like, why does this band have a DJ?
I know. Although, man, it's funny. I should go back and listen to like Science and stuff, and because there's those early Incubus records were so good. And I remember
Incubus is like the one band that I can say that I saw like way early.
Oh yeah,
no idea that they were going to get as big as they did. Yeah, I saw them. I think it was before their second album came out, in Providence, Rhode Island, when I was in college, and my friend's band opened up for them.
Whoa!
Like, it was in like a room with like maybe 50 people. They just played like all of Science basically, because they didn't really have anything else. And then when they still had like the dreads and like everything, and like Brandon would like play like bongos on stage and stuff like that, because they were kind of like half hippie, like half metal, kind of thing. And it's really like nostalgic to go back and listen to Science, because I remember like getting that album one summer, and I was like walking to and from work listening to it on like the headphones or whatever.
That was like the soundtrack to my freshman year of college, probably. Like sitting in a dorm room with my friends, brewing up like a special tea, and and listening to that record and hanging out. But I mean, it's like, think about it, dude. There was so much talent that was just sprouting, and like you're saying, like you have to weed through the needle in the haystack kind of thing, because it really does, like, it got oversaturated with a lot of garbage. But there's some special stuff from that time that I'm trying to introduce my daughter to, like, music from that era, and she's just not into it. Like, it's just too hard for her, or she thinks it's too hard. But like, I can agree with her on several things that she likes. But when Justin Timberlake's 2020 came out, that record, I fell in love with that album. and then the subsequent album. And that was like my first time I was like, oh, Justin Timberlake's kind of hip, man. Like this stuff is actually, I can see the value of this, you know, in my life. Because of having the funk background and like getting deeper into R&B and neo soul, like I started to like understand him more. But like, there's an amazing special, by the way, on Netflix. That's like his last 2 shows in Vegas that they filmed at the end of that tour. Oh my gosh,
I remember when they were pushing that. Yeah, when it was
dude,
like up on the main page. Yeah,
no backing tracks, no auto tune, just a bunch of killing musicians pulling off the most hip stuff. And you know, it's a show, so it's like calculated and everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, dude, like you got to be on your toes to do a gig like that. So mad respect to those musicians.
I remember seeing him on SNL. I think it was when his second album came out, and he was doing that one song. I forget the name of it. And he was like playing like a Wurlitzer or something while he was singing, and I was just like, "Oh, okay,
yeah, yeah."
Because I just knew him from the boy band stuff, you know, and I was like, none of those guys are musicians, you know. But then I saw that, and I was like, okay, all right, okay,
yeah,
I can see it. And then you know, like he's willing to make fun of himself on SNL, and he's a good actor, you know. And it's like he does all this funny stuff with Andy Samberg, you know. So I was definitely like, okay, I can dig it. I can dig it.
Yeah, I like that, dude. So tell me what your first guitar rig was when you first had an electric guitar, an amp, and any pedals.
My first guitar was a Gibson Sonics 180, which is this model they made in like the late 70s, early 80s. That was like this budget Les Paul shaped thing, and it had it was a resin body. It was like a wood core with a resin body. So it looked like a Les Paul, but it had like it had like bevels on the sides and stuff. And it had a bolt-on neck. And I think I had the top model, the custom, which had like a maple neck and had a coil tap that didn't seem to do anything. Turned it on and off. It had really hot pickups. It was like not dirty fingers, but it was like something kind of like that, like real hot humbuckers. And I bought it used, and I think I had originally like some like terrible amp, like it was like by Hohner, or you know, like one of those companies, and it was like plastic, you know, but then it broke, and then my dad got me this little Fender. It wasn't good. It was solid state. It had push buttons for the different gain levels, like on an old air conditioner where you push one in and the other one would pop out, you know, like, which was actually
like an 8-track.
Yeah, exactly. And it was terrible because it just meant it was like it was like clean rock metal. You know, you couldn't dial it in. It was like you were just stuck with that.
Yeah.
My first pedal was actually a Metal Zone, because I think my guitar teacher told me it could do a lot of sounds or something, which in retrospect is sort of true because it does have a lot of EQ, but it, you know, always kind of sounds buzzsaw,
right?
Especially through a bad amp, you know. And then later I got like a blues driver, I think, and like a super, like most of my pedals were all Boss because it was like that's what was around then, you know, easy to find, you know, and like a wah wah, you know, because I just wanted to be able to do the porn music. But,
yeah. Did you have any so like, was there early on, was there an inkling to tinker with stuff?
Yeah, I've always been like that. As a kid, I remember taking apart broken toys and like fixing them.
Really?
Like my friend had these 2 water guns that looked like Colt 45s, and like one was broken. And well, they were both broken in different ways, and I actually took them apart and like put them back together so one worked. I've done that, and I always like love to customize and personalize stuff. You know, like I could buy the nicest guitar in the world, and I would still probably be like, oh, I could try some other pickups in this. You know, like it could literally be like a 59 Les Paul, and I'd be like, what if I put, you know,
what if I change these frets and refinish it? And
you know, PAFs are overrated. Let me put no, but yeah, like But see, I would have been a guy in the 70s that probably would have had a 60 Les Paul and would have put like DiMarzios in it, like a lot of guys did back then, you know,
just
because they didn't know. I've always kind of tinkered. Like it's a thing. Like, you know, I did that. I went to art school, so that most of my tinkering was just doing art projects all the time. And then, you know, I was into prop replica stuff and costumes and all that. And that's kind of where I learned how to do all the fake aging stuff that I do on some of my pedals, you know? So
yeah,
I've always kind of been into that stuff. Like anything that I own, even like my cameras and stuff, I'm always trying to figure out ways to like make it work better for what I need it to do, kind of thing. It's just a thing that I do. So,
man,
yeah.
let's talk about the path through your, you know, art career too, because, you know, moving into that for like college and stuff. So was like music put on the back burner, like guitar, everything, like you like were like, I'm full on into this world? And because talk a little bit about, you know, how you got into it.
Okay, so I was lucky enough that my hometown had like a magnet school program for high schools, and they had an art school it was like performing arts, creative writing, visual art, music, kind of like fame, you know, kind of
Right
thing. So I went there, you know, majored in visual arts, and you know, and there's a point when your teachers start saying to you, like, you know, you're good enough that you could go do this, like go to college. Because a lot of people would just do it at the high school and then they would never play the flute again, you know, after high school or whatever. And so, you know, my parents were supportive, and they were like, okay. So we were looking at art schools, and I got into RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, which is like a pretty old, you know, well-respected art school. And I was playing in a band in high school, and then we got on like a compilation CD of like local bands. That was cool. So we got to go to like record, you know, a song in the studio, which was cool when you're like 17 or whatever. And then I went to art school, and the thing is that like everybody was also a musician. You know, like it wasn't like a thing where it was like, oh, I play guitar. And everyone's like, wow, how do you do both? It was like literally, I think like on my freshman floor, like there was like 25 guys and like 20 of them played guitar.
That's awesome.
You know, like, and then I met guys that were like way better as musicians than I was. And so I was kind of like, you know what? I think it might be better to just put more in, like this art thing is going to be the thing I'm going to do as a career. Like music will just be a hobby kind of thing, just because, yeah. And that's not me like ragging on myself. It's like sometimes you just understand your skill level and you're like, you know, I'm okay. Like I've been playing for a long time, so I have like a certain level, but I'm not like a genius. I don't pick up theory very easily. It's just, you kind of know. And so yeah, it was just like, this is the better thing for me to, you know, to really be like the path I'm going to go down kind of thing. So yeah, that was kind of how it went.
And then did you like right after college, did you go west? Like when did you end up there?
I moved back to my hometown after college because I didn't have any kind of job prospects. And then 9/11 happened, you know, 3 months later or whatever. And that kind of threw everything, and, you know, the world went crazy, and there was like a hiring freeze on the East Coast, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And it took like a year or so living in my hometown. I got a job at a commercial art house in my hometown as like an assistant artist. And that was cool because it was like a real gig, you know, real art gig. But I got laid off after like a year because they were like they didn't have enough work. And then I just said to a friend of mine from college, like, hey, we both want to try to do animation. Like, do you just want to move to LA? And he had a friend that lived out there, and we were like, okay. So like I sold my car and moved out there and slept on a guy's couch for a couple months, and, you know, then lived off the money from selling my car for a while until I got like my first job. And luckily I met some people that were like, became friends that, you know, like a friend of mine was a line producer in like reality TV, and he was like, I can get you some art department jobs. And I was like, okay, you know,
That's
I just
awesome.
kind of hustled for a while, just like whatever came my way. I mean, I'd like parked cars one time at a tribute to Al Green concert, or like BET like filmed concert, and
Nice.
I got to meet Bonnie Raitt, so that was kind of cool. But you know,
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
she's pretty awesome.
yeah.
Well, so at that point, so when did you land the gig you're in now? Like, how long have you been doing that?
So I got into Nickelodeon in 2004. I'd been in LA for about a year. I had a friend that was the head of post-production. He got me a job as a post-production assistant. And my job was mainly making labels for the library, because we had like a library of like tapes and screeners for all the episodes.
Yeah.
So I would make like labels for the show so it looked all nice, and when they like loaned them out to people, like it looked professional or whatever. I did that for about a year, and then I got into doing like the After Effects and CG stuff in this group that was called Nick Digital. That was like a group. I mean, it sounds stupid now, but like back then, like when I first started there, they were still doing animation where it was like shot on cells, like on film. You know, It wasn't really hadn't transitioned yet. So I started doing that, and then so what's this? 16 years later, yeah. I was at Nick for about 8 years, worked on a ton of different shows because that group was just in post-production and just worked on whatever show needed work. So it was like SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, like anything that kind of came through.
Mm-hmm.
I left for 3 years and worked at Marvel Animation. I was the visual effects supervisor on Avengers Assemble, which was like the new Avengers show that was sort of more based off the movie, which had just come out like a year before.
I've watched it. I'm a nerd.
I did that for 3 years, and also worked on the Hulk show a little bit and the Guardians of the Galaxy show before I left. And then I came back to Nick in 2015. And then the guy that was the head of the group got laid off or got fired, and then they bumped me and another guy up to co-run the group. So I ran that group for another 3 years, and then they kind of dissolved it because it was like a lack of work. And then that's when SpongeBob picked me up, because they had like a bunch of stuff they needed me to do that we'd been talking about for like 6 months. And they were like, okay. So I've been on SpongeBob since. And now SpongeBob has branched out from 1 show to 3 shows. We refer to it as the SpongeBob universe. So it's pretty cool. It's like it's like a cinematic universe of SpongeBob.
That's killer. So do you feel like you pinch yourself these days with that? Like that you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this for a living kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, especially when I talk to friends from my hometown that are just still doing like, you know, blue collar stuff or whatever, you know, like I could have just, I mean, I don't think that I would have just been like doing that kind of thing for the rest of my life. Like, I don't think if I couldn't draw, I probably would have been like try to be a writer or something like that. But
you took a risk, Chris. I mean, that was a big risk to just like uproot and be like, all right, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah. And a lot of people that come out here are here for like a year, and then just you run out of money or whatever because the rent's high. You know, I can't even imagine it now. I mean, it was still high then, but it's like crazy now.
Yeah.
I hear these stories from these kids on the show that are like, you know, to be able to afford being paid like production assistant wages, they like live in like an apartment with like 5 people, you know, where someone's like sleeping in the dining room and, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like,
dude,
it's not good. But
so then, okay. So it's nice that you have your career. And then you can like refocus on music, I guess, at that point, once you felt like stable and you're like, okay, I got my career going.
Yeah.
So like, what leads you to be like, I'm going to start making effects?
Well, when I got back into playing, it was when I got my house, and it was like, I wasn't living in an apartment anymore. I didn't feel like I was annoying the crap out of my neighbors if I was playing, you know, as long as I wasn't playing super loud. And it was, you know, it was the beginning of this sort of boutique pedal renaissance that we're in. And also, if you don't have a ton of money, you can buy a lot of pedals for less than 1 amp, you know, so you can just have a lot of sounds and try stuff. And I didn't really know what a lot of this stuff was. So it was like just buying stuff and being like, what's this? Oh, that's a rat based off a rat, or, oh, that's a big muff, or what's this fuzz? Oh, a gated fuzz. I like that, you know, kind of thing. And then I was hanging out with some guys as friends, you know, some guitar buddies, and I was like looking at, somebody told me, oh, you know, you can buy like these pedal kits from this place called Build Your Own Clone. They give you everything. You just need a soldering iron. And I had a soldering iron because I was changing pickups in my guitar. And I was like, all right, I could try that. And then my friend had never known how to use a tube screamer. He'd never owned one. So I was like, I'm going to make him an 808. So I made him an 808. It was the first pedal I ever made. I did this goofy artwork where I did a laser print transfer of this goofy picture of him on the back, and
oh, nice.
Gave it to him, and then taught him about how, like, with high gain amps, if it's really fizzy, you turn it down and then you boost it with like a tube screamer. And he was like, oh my God, like it was this big and so that was the first one. And then for a while, I was just kind of building kits either for myself or gifts for friends. And I think the real kind of, I guess, transition point was I heard about this pedal company called Mythos Pedals, and I bought one of their pedals. And then I was like, I really like this. And then I started following Zach on Instagram, and then he did kits. And so I bought his boost kit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, it's the Mythos and it's a booster. So it's the Myth booster. Mm-hmm. And then I did it in the Mythbusters font. And then literally a week later, he was on Rhett Shaw's podcast talking about how, like, he loves Mythbusters and Adam Savage and laser engraving. And I was like, that's all that stuff I just did on this pedal.
Oh my gosh.
So I tagged him and stuff. And then he saw it. And then I think he saw that I worked at Nick and thought that was cool. And like, we became friends. And then I was sort of thinking about if I wanted to try to make stuff as like a side business. And Zach was like, with your art skills, I think you could do it. And I would give you some help. And look, I don't tell that to everybody.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I got to at least try at this point. You know, if I got somebody that's actually helping me, because that's the biggest thing, is a lot of people start off and they don't know anybody and they don't know how to do anything and they don't have anybody to ask. I mean, I know we have the internet and Reddit and Google, but it's like sometimes
it's not the same.
Nicer to just be like, hey, what's up with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's kind of, and then honestly, the pandemic happened. And then it was like, you know, I'm stuck at home.
Mm-hmm. Why not?
Mail order stuff. And then just, you know, that was kind of, I think I talked myself out of it until that happened. And then it was like, okay, well, I'm just here. So I might as well give it a shot. And if it doesn't go anywhere, it's not a big deal, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I just, you know, that's kind of how it started. So
it always seems to start as a passion project, right? Like it's always like the why not? Like, what do I have to lose? Like, you know, if it's like
Zach said a lot in his live streams. He was like, if you want to do this, you better want to do it, because it's not easy. And it's not like you just get to play other people's pedals and stuff all the time. Like it's a lot of work. And so that was kind of why I was like, maybe I won't do it. You know, but I like making stuff. I love guitar pedals. And also like talking to some other people like Grant from Big Ear and a couple other friends that are pedal makers. It's like, you don't always have to be reinventing the wheel to do this. You can just be like, this is what I like, and I'm just going to make it in the way that I like it. And hopefully other people will also like it. You know, like, I mean, there are guys out there that are pushing the envelope and doing crazy stuff, and because they're like audio, you know, circuit designers, and they can do all that. But you can also just make a really sick sounding version of a classic circuit and with cool art, and then that might hit too, you know. So
I feel like that's the way it always is for all art, right? It should be that way. It should be like your audience will find you if you have something that speaks to you and you create this thing. There are going to be other people out there that feel the same way about it. I mean, this is, you know, Anna just said, whatever it takes to get you where you want to be, go for it. All a part of being a starving artist, right? So that's the way. I mean, I feel like, here, let me grab this sucker. So Chris made this. Since we are Pearl Jam fans, this little graphic was on Dave Aberzee's bass drum. If you go back,
and Stone's
yep.
Les Paul.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you go back in time during the Versus era, you will see this. And I've never, and Chris was like, I'm going to send you something. And I didn't know what it was. And I was like, for all I know, it's a booger in a napkin. I don't know, whatever he's sending is going to be funny. But I never owned a Rat ever. I don't think I've ever even played through one until I played through this. And it's a circuit that I didn't expect to love as much as I do, because I don't have any like distortion. I have a bunch of fuzz and a bunch of overdrive, but this is a different flavor. And I have had people, so I did a review of, or not a review, a demo of O.C.E Pedals Kelpton is GOG, which is a blues breaker circuit plus some. And I've had tons of people send me messages about how much they love that. And they're like, I just sent an email to Chris if he's going to make any more or whatever. And then I did this one, and someone is like, is he going to do those two? And I was like, I don't know, but he should, because it's awesome. And it really, you know, it comes down to a couple things for me, man. Like, A, it sounds great. But like, B, like, it just looks great too. Like, and that's the thing. If you're looking down at your pedal board, you know, I wanna have fun stuff to look at too. When I look down to step, I don't have any pedals that are white. No, well, I have the Zen Ray, and like Ariel's pedal is gray. That AP broadcast is like gray. This is like snow white. And it's really cool. So I mean, like, what Zach is saying is true. Like, you have this market where you're creating authentic, cool circuits with really wonderful, intentional artwork, and like probably stuff that makes you giddy when you think about it. Like doing the Mythbuster thing. You were probably like, yeah, like when you thought of it. It is fun. It's like there's a bit of humor in what we do, you know, as artists. And without it, man, like, it gets stale. But like even the like half shield thing. Like, you know, it's just like the tongue-in-cheek, like, fun stuff that people don't really think about. It's like, it's a lot of ideas that you probably have turning in your head that you're like, I'm gonna do this, and then this, and this will bring it all together.
I wanted to do a Rat with the Rat. I think it's a like a studio or something, because I actually bought that sticker as like a merch pack from them.
Right.
That's called like Rat Sound or something. And apparently those guys had some connection to it, because like, you know, Eddie put it in the lyrics and Dave had the thing, and it was on, I knew it was on Stone's Clownverse Les Paul Custom. He had it on the, it was like early on, it had a 3 on the pick guard, and then later he put the Rat thing on it. So I was always trying to figure out like what that was. Oh, my cool blue light died.
It's okay. You still look cool, brother.
Battery power. And I wanted to make a Rat with that for a while, but I was kind of like, well, it's not like Stone played a Rat. So I had to like kind of figure out a way to do it. And then when it was you and Jeremy, the guitar hunter, were two people that were willing to just take a pedal from me and do videos without me like giving you a pedal, just to do it, you know. And I just wanted to thank you guys. So like, I did a modded phaser for Jeremy, and then I did this pedal for you. And I was like, oh, I can finally, he loves Pearl Jam. I looked up what the lyric sheet looked like. So like the Rats
the
is
font,
like kind of a copy.
I noticed.
I was like, this, I can finally do this for Mark. And I knew that you kind of probably didn't have a lot of like distortion pedals, because I kind of knew like your style and stuff. But my thing with Rats and like Big Muffs is they get that. I mean, I love gain. I'm like a gain guy, but there's these circuits that kind of get like lumped into like, oh, well, like sludgy guys play them, or like they're only for like shoegaze or whatever. But like, you can just turn the gain down and there's other cool sounds, you know, out of them. That was kind of always my thing. And then my thing with Rats is I've just been playing around with different clipping options. And so like the one that I did for you is LED clipping, which means it's like it's more output, lower gain, so it's a little bit crunchier and a little bit more open. And I thought that would work better for you for kind of
Perfect
what
for
you
me.
would use it for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was, you know, that's really what where I'm at right now is I've learned how to use the software to design the board layouts so I can start doing that. But then it's like sitting there and tweaking them and just trying different parts and different clipping and being like, what is it? How do I want it to sound? What is the crisp version of this stuff sound like? So that's kind of where I'm at.
That's so cool, man. I mean, and if anybody goes back and watches the video I did with that pedal, with this pedal, I played a bunch of blues stuff and I played some funk stuff. So it's not, a pedal is a tool, and how you want to use it on your belt is entirely up to you.
I think I teased this on my Instagram, but this is like a prototype that I've been working on for a fuzz, but I teased the hardware series stamp. And I know that people might know that I'd done these series of fuzzes called the hardware fuzz. That was this, I used to work at a hardware store when I was a kid that was called Mayer's Hardware. And there's these Mayer mods to fuzz faces. So I did those and I called them the hardware fuzz, and they had little tools bolted onto them.
Yeah, I loved it.
People seem to really dig it. And I was trying to figure out like, well, where do I want to go for now? And I was like, well, people like those. I like doing them. I'd love to sort of standardize what I'm doing to an extent. So it's like, it's not so much like these one-offs where like sometimes people really love them and sometimes maybe I have to wait a while for people to want to buy one.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm moving. I want to do some classic circuits that I like as these different hardware things. And that, so that's there's going to be a rat, and that'll be probably a big muff and a fuzz and maybe some other stuff. I'm just kind of tinkering with stuff right now, but that's kind of where I'm moving.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Are you getting more people like trying to get you to do more of the Kelpton is Gog like pedals, or are you starting?
I've gotten a few people. Yeah. After the Jeremy's video, a few people reached out, and I started doing these naked ones where it's just like a naked like a bare enclosure with the stamp on it. Cause then I can do it quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And because those other ones were all painted and like weathered, so it was all these different layers of like primers and stuff to do that.
Yeah,
it took a long time, and I don't really want to do that again because it was like a month of just spray painting and stuff to get to like where I was even building the pedal itself. So I don't know if I want to do that, but I've gotten people that have been interested, and actually just recently somebody. Like a well-known gear review channel was talking about doing a Blues Breaker shootout. So I might end up sending them my loaner to be in that too. So we'll see if that kind of, leads to anything. I'd love to actually get in there and tweak the circuit, not to change the sound, but to make it a little bit easier to build. That circuit was, Zach helped me with that. He made the circuit layout for that because I hadn't really learned everything yet, but there's some stuff I could do to make it a little quicker to build, which is, that's the whole thing when you're like, it's like pedal building. It's like learning how to do it. And then it's like, how do I do this so that it's quicker and I can maximize my time and how much stuff I can put out. And, so I'm not like taking like 2 days to build stuff. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, is like figuring out what I want to do, but also trying to figure out ways it's like, I think Adam Savage calls it order of operation, where it's like getting your list of how you make things. So every time you do it the same way kind of thing.
That's the thing that a lot of people probably don't know is like how much energy goes into one box, from, kind of realization of what you want to do to like actually like putting your hands on something, to building it, to making it look cool, to checking to make sure it works and doesn't die. And like, there's a lot that goes into it.
I remember Zach talking about, like, he was saying, oh, it takes like a year. And I was like, yeah, right. And then when somebody had asked me, I'd done a Kelpton is Gog for myself. That was just a BYOC kit that I'd done that art on. And it was just a joke of the Kelpton is God logo, the old the graffiti. And someone said, "Hey, can you build me one?" And I was like, "Well, it's like a kit. I don't really want to sell kits that I built because that just it's not like me." And Zach was like, "I could do a bluesbreaker board for you." And I was like, "Okay." And so he did it. And then, yeah, it took like 6 months of me messing around with stuff to where I got to the point where I thought it sounded good. And then it was like another 3 months of like trying to figure out, well, how do I get all the stuff to make it? And then there was like, then there was all these COVID related
supply chain
parts
issues,
chain stuff where it was like I had trouble getting enclosures and and so yeah, it was crazy. I think it was like somebody asked me to do that in like last fall, and then I put them out in, what was it, like August or something like that of this year, or like July. So it was yeah, it definitely, there's a lot more that goes, especially if you really care about how they sound. There's a lot of like just trying, oh, this is a 0.22. What if I try a 0.33?
Right.
Okay, what if I try a 0.56 just to go crazy? Like, because you never know. Like, one of the things with the Calpton was the high gain, low gain switch was, Zach was like, yeah, if you put different resistors, it like increases the gain to the second op amp stage. And I was like, okay. And he goes, yeah, most people do like a 280. And I was like, all right. And I was like, what if I do 510? What does that do? And it actually sounded kind of cool in a different way. But I was like, maybe I should put this on a switch so that if people want like the normal and then, kind of thing. And so it's like, there's, yeah, it's just a lot of messing around with stuff. And it's, it can be fun, but you definitely should not put anything under like a hard deadline. I mean,
no, it doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, I guess, and if somebody like Zach, he's kind of always got to be, thinking about something new and not resting on his laurels. But man, I'll probably never want another delay pedal. The Oracle does exactly what I want. And I've looked for so many years, Chris, to find a delay pedal that works with me. That thing is perfect. It's all over the new track that we did, and it's awesome. It sounds so good. It's funny because when we were recording it and we were going to go down there, I was like, I know I'm playing piano on this. It's like I wrote it on that. I'm going to play a guitar part, and I know I'm doing a guitar solo. But like, what should I bring? And it was just like a K circuit, like Jesse's Silicon Fuzz and Zach's delay. So I had the Nordvang #1 and the fuzz, and then that, and it sounded huge and awesome.
I
threw a 66 Princeton. So it was
just all the amp.
I mean, that amp, dude, when we plugged in, so the guitar stuff was almost the last thing we did that day. And he walked up and he's like, okay, so I've got a Princeton in there. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. Let me go check it out. And he's like, okay. So we went in and I was like, oh, this is like a Princeton. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, this will be fine. I was like, all right, let's just plug it in. And they said my bass player was in the control room, and they're like, all right, just give us some sounds. And I was playing, and my bass player was like, yo, that is the best guitar sound I've ever heard come from you. Like, even over the 2 Rock. And I was like, well, this is not my amp, so you need to shut your face. Like,
my friend has a 66 or 67 Princeton, and it was one of the nicest amps I've ever heard until I think I got my Imperial. Like
that amp is special, man. Yeah. Like the Imperial is like, that's a real deal amp. Like,
yeah, it's like I remember when I got it, I was like, I think I'm like maybe not good enough to play this amp. Because it's that thing where like when there's that much harmonic content coming out of the speaker, you hear mess ups way more.
Yeah, you can't hide.
Yeah, so
that's how these are too, man. I have that Bartell.
Oh, the Bartell, yeah. So he worked at Tone King. Is that the deal? And then
he started Tone King.
Oh, okay.
So he is the originator of Tone King. And then when the Premier Builders Guild came together and they scooped up Tone King, 2 Rock, and what else did they have under that brand? I can't remember. It wasn't Fuchs. I don't know. But anyway, I think what happened with that is like he started building under them. And then I don't know what happened. whatever. He went his own way, and then they're like, you can't build, you know, these specific types of circuits anymore. And he's like, all right, I'll go do something better. Because these things, not that the Imperial is a masterpiece. Like, I played through one for about an hour and a half at Chicago Music Exchange the one day I was in there. But like, he's just a smart dude, and he knows hi-fi guitar sound. And that's what that amp is. It's like you said, the harmonic content, everything about the way that amp projects what you're playing through your fingers is like, you know, pristine. It's a great amp. So
I'm trying to do a new pedal board thing where I'm just playing through the Imperial. And so I'm kind of changing everything up where I'm trying to use the amp drive more. Kind of like just boosting it, you know, instead of having a ton of pedals on the board. But yeah, I had like a Friedman for a while, and not to say it was a bad amp. It's just, you know, every once in a while you'll get to a point where you're like, you know what, I think I just want to change some stuff up. And so I'm doing that, and I kind of want to get some kind of like just straight ahead plexi kind of thing to like complement it. So
heck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you ready to do some lightning round get down? Because I know you've been waiting your whole life for this. All right. So you know the drill, Chris.
Yep.
I'm gonna ask you 10 questions. Rapid fire. You can just, you know, spit out what you want to spit out, or you can explain your answers. I'd love hearing explanations, but you don't have to. So do not feel obligated.
Okay.
First question. Always the same. Lennon or McCartney?
Yeah, I'm not a huge Beatles guy, so I'm gonna say McCartney just because he was on The Simpsons.
Okay, that's a good enough answer for me. Cheez-Its or Goldfish?
Oh, Cheez-Its.
Goonies or Stand By Me?
Oh, Stand By Me is like one of my top 5. Yeah.
Clone Wars or Rebels?
You know what? I haven't watched Rebels. So I'll just say Clone Wars just because that's the one that I've watched more of. Yeah.
Dude, it's really good.
I know. I gotta just get Disney Plus and spend some time. I just don't have a lot of free time.
I hear you. I hear you. All right. Deadpool or Wolverine? Best buds.
Oh, Wolverine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tonebender or Fuzzface?
Fuzzface. Yeah.
Jordans or Vans?
Oh, okay. My first real cool pair of shoes was some Jordans, like Jordan 5s when I was a kid. And I can't wear Vans anymore because I have plantar fasciitis. So
okay.
I'll go with some old school Jordans. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Superpowers. Super intellect or the power to heal almost any ailment?
You know what? I'll go with the healing thing because my body's starting to break down as an old man now, and I'd really like to be able to make my knees feel better, you know? Like
I hear you on that one, man. Sometimes you ever bend down to brush your teeth and all of a sudden you get a shooting pain up your back? What's that about? What is that about? I want to know what it's about. All right. If you got blasted into space and you were with one person, would you rather hang with Elon or with Bezos?
Ugh.
I know.
This is gonna. I think you know what? I think Elon, just because we could talk about space, like we could talk about like the SR-71 Blackbird or something.
Oh yeah,
we're both space dorks. I don't really even know if Bezos is, but I don't really like Elon either. But I guess him. Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and the final question. Sometimes the hardest, sometimes the easiest. If you could take one album and erase it from your memory, like Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, like you've never heard it before, just so you could go back and listen to it again for the first time, what album would that be?
You know, I've actually thought about this because of listening to your other episodes. I'm going to go with The Shape of Punk to Come by The Refused.
I am not familiar with that band or that album at all, so please explain.
Refused is like a Swedish hardcore punk band, and they only had 2 albums. And their first one was kind of just more of like a politically minded, like hardcore album. And then they came out with the second album, The Shape of Punk to Come, that's just like has all these crazy elements to it. There's like electronica and like jazz and like spoken word and weird. It's just this crazy mishmash. And it's amazing. Like I remember like hearing something where like Sting said he felt like it was like continuing what the Police were trying to do, And yeah, like it. I remember like, but then like weirdly, like Corey from Slipknot was a huge fan because he had this idea that maybe like Slipknot would only put out 2 albums and then break up, just like Refused did. But my reason for this is I love the album. But when I first heard it, because I was just hardcore dude, I was like, what is this? There's like jungle beats and like what the, like, and I would love to go back and hear it for the first time, but without that bias, that I had when I was 18 or 19 or whenever I heard it for the first time,
man.
Because it's like it's a seminal album, and I just wish that I had a better head on my shoulders when I heard it for the first time. That's it. Yeah.
Is that record like, can you hear it on streaming services, or is it like, no, it's like just like a deep buried,
you know what?
Relic?
No, they're not that unknown. And they did like a reunion tour a couple years ago where they played like Coachella, and it was like a huge deal. So they're not like unknown. They're kind of like one of those bands like the Pixies, where it was like a lot of people heard about them later because of other people talking about them, but they weren't like huge at the time, kind of thing. But yeah, it's weird. It's like this crazy hardcore, but then they have like this mod aesthetic kind of when they did it too, where they were all wearing like button up white shirts and stuff. So there's just a bunch of, it's like crazy European influences mixed in and stuff. So it's just like a really cool album. I mean, I don't know if you dig it, because I know, but also I know that you're very open-minded musically. So maybe, but yeah.
I am. I mean, when I was younger, I listened to Minor Threat and Fugazi and all that stuff when I was a kid. And, I mean, being from close to DC, like some of that stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
And then, and I was reading, my wife just got me Dave Grohl's Storyteller book last night.
Yeah.
And I started reading it, and it's awesome. It's really cool. And like, he's just such a wealth of knowledge about all those like old punk bands. And, if you really go back and listen to all those old punk bands, it's like, it's interesting because it's like its own thing, but there's a sense of melody that still exists in it, even though it's hard and it's like voracious and whatnot. There's a sensibility, like a musical sensibility with melody in it that, people probably didn't really pay attention to because they just heard the cacophony of everything else.
Yeah. I remember somebody talking about like Ian MacKaye, like from Minor Threat, that's like, even though he was just sort of yelling, there was still like a tune to it. Like, and they were a huge band for me. I mean, I have the concept sheep, like that, and Fugazi. And, when I was in college, I lived across the hall from a kid that was from DC. So he just like told me about all that kind of DC Discord record stuff.
Yeah.
And, I would say Refused is probably closer to that than like, metalcore.
Right.
Like there's definitely melody and like, hooks to it, especially that album,
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I'll check it out, man. That's why I love that question. Cause sometimes there's like left, curveballs coming out of nowhere. I'm just like, oh, okay. I need to go listen to some new music. Like sometimes, man, you get into that cycle where you're just listening to the same stuff in the car. I just put this in my stories the other night, but there's this guy, Blue Macaulay, who is like a power pop guy. And I love that stuff, like Jellyfish and Owsley and all these old power pop like bands from the 90s that were totally out of place, but still, like way ahead of what was going on. And he just put a new record out, and it is mind-blowingly good. Like the songwriting, the production, like he was on my show last season, maybe. And like, I feel bad because it doesn't have a lot of hits on it. Like as far as like views. And I'm like, he is like by far the sleeper in the industry. He's in LA, and he works like on a bunch of Disney stuff. Like he did a lot of the music for like a couple of the Tinkerbell movies.
Okay.
So he has his hand in like a bunch of TV film stuff, as well as his own career. And he's a producer and produces other records. But like, if I could recommend a record to anybody, like right now, his album is called Six Tape, SIX tape. And it's like a picture of a hand holding a VHS tape.
Nice.
So he's clever and cheeky and fun, but like there's stuff like that, like you said, like I'm totally open. I'll probably go check that record out tomorrow if I can find it.
Yeah, I've been like, I was very non-open for a long time in my life, and I've been trying to be more open. I definitely like stuff with guitar in it. That's the thing. Like it, you know, but I've been definitely trying to be like, there was a period in my life when I was like, it was like, it's just freaking metalcore and angry all the time, you know, kind of thing. And I just didn't want to hear it's like anything poppy. And there was this band, I don't know if you ever heard of them, Sleigh Bells. It's this weird band where it's like pop electronic stuff, but then the dude plays like electric guitar, and he was in like a hard metalcore band called Poison the Well. And I remember like hearing that and being like my head just exploding out of like young man vehemence. Like, how could you go do that?
Right. Yeah. I totally I remember back in the day in high school being exposed to like suicidal tendencies and stuff like that, where I was like, I've never heard anything like this.
Yeah.
You know, because everybody was listening to Green Day and all that and Sublime and I was just like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. And then like and that turns you into other bands that were like kind of from that cloth that were older than that band. I can't think of them right now, but like, it's a fun, that's why I like being open to everything, because I'll listen to it. If I don't like it, I don't like it, but I'm open to like, please, like, you know, shower me with something new, like inspire me.
I mean, weirdly, like some of the stuff that's got me into like weird avenues now has been either hearing people make covers of stuff or watching music documentaries. Like I got into a huge country kick after watching the Ken Burns country documentary that came out a couple of years ago. Yeah, I was like listening to like old Merle Haggard and like, you know, it's all this kind of stuff. And then that got me into some younger guys, you know, like Billy Strings and Tyler Childers and stuff like that are doing it now. And then like Marcus King played a cover of Sin's a Good Man's Brother by Grand Funk Railroad for like one of those Carter vintage things where he's just playing one of their old guitars. And I was like, oh man, now I got to go listen to Grand Funk Railroad. This is awesome. You know,
dude, dude, for real. I have a 45 upstairs from Grand Funk that I think I inherited from like my uncle or something. And I don't know if I've ever listened to it, but it's there. But all right, Chris, well, dude, thank you so much for hanging out. I wish we could do this for way longer, but I got to put my kid to bed soon and eat dinner. But we'll do it another time. We'll just hang out and talk on video ourselves.
Sounds good, dude.
But real quick though, there he is, Mr. Dad. Mr. I'm not sleeping at all. Probably.
I joked with him because I was calling him Two Switch because he loves dual pedals, and then I was like, and now you have two kids.
Yeah. Dual switch. Yeah, that's
scary.
Thanks, Kalki. Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks, dude.
So everybody, you know, check out O.C.E. Chris, where can everybody find like your Instagram and all that?
So Instagram is O.C.E Pedals on Instagram. That's kind of where I post most of my stuff now. I'm working on towards like a website for sales to make it easier, but for now it's like I post stuff on there and do the sales through DMs. I also have a YouTube channel, but that's mostly just like I only have like a couple videos. It was just some stuff for the Kelpton. I mean, if you want to go check it out, there's some videos of the Kelpton as GOG. You can also check out Mark's video, which was awesome. And yeah, that's it. Instagram mostly. So yeah.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. Well, everybody go check it out and check out all the demos and wrap your ears around it. It's really great stuff. Like Chris is doing some really, you know, unique, interesting takes on great classic circuits and beautiful artwork, you know, which doesn't surprise us at all because he's a great artist. So, but all right, guys, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.